Hello, welcome everybody. This is Paul Chasse Consulting Services, and this is Module 5 of the ITI Certification Program. Today we're going to talk about e-learning. We're also going to talk about creating lesson plans and a little bit about attention spans. This is the final module in the online piece of the blended course. So welcome, again, Module 5, and we're going to start right now. So what are we talking today? We're talking about distance education, quite different from regular classroom education. We'll get into the differences and what it means, and if you plan on doing distance education, what that could mean for you as an instructor. This module has been designed to give you some overview information on e-learning. Please understand that I could design this entire 30-hour training just around e-learning itself, but as part of the ITI training, we're just going to do a little bit of e-learning education training for you. This is definitely a space where you will want to become more familiar with down the road, since strong trends continue to take learning in the online direction. So it's good to know online and distance education. But before we start that, we're going to talk a little bit about attention spans and how to combat short attention spans. Before we start, I've got this interesting article from, it was from Microsoft actually, and it's called How You Now Have a Shorter Attention Span Than a Goldfish. No longer can we boast about 12 seconds of coherent thought. So this is based on some research that was done a little while ago, but it's an article that was produced by Microsoft. It says the average attention span for the notoriously ill-focused goldfish is 9 seconds, but according to a new study from Microsoft, people now generally lose concentration after 8 seconds. So humans have an 8-second time attention span, highlighting the effects of an increasingly digitized lifestyle on the brain. Researchers in Canada surveyed 2,000 participants using EEGs. Microsoft found that since the year 2000, or about when the mobile revolution began, the average attention span dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. Heavy multi-screeners find it difficult to filter out irrelevant stimuli. They're more easily distracted by multiple streams of media, multitasking, the report says. On the positive side, the report says our ability to multitask has drastically improved the mobility age. Microsoft theorized that the changes were a result of the brain's ability to adapt and change itself over time, and a weaker attention span may be a side effect to evolving to a more mobile internet. The survey also confirmed generational differences for mobile use. For example, 77% of people aged 18 to 24 responded yes when asked, when nothing is occupying my attention, the first thing I do is reach for my phone, compared with only 10% of those over the age of 65. So it's also good to know your audience as well. But the crux of the article is that we now have 8-second attention spans. So what does that mean for education? What does that mean for distance education? Well, it means a lot. It means that we have to keep continuing to keep people's attention spans and keep them focused in order to get them to understand and to learn what it is that we're trying to teach them. So with that being said, we're going to move on a little bit here, and we're going to talk about things like web conferencing and pieces like that. Before we do that, a couple things that I wanted to talk about is the course itself. And, so I have 7 tips on beating short attention spans in learning. And so we'll go over those just briefly before we begin with the distance education differences. So 7 tips include divide longer e-learning courses into bite-sized modules. Instead of perceiving learners' short attention spans as an obstacle standing in the way of achieving goals and objectives, why not look at it as a standard that allows you to create e-learning deliverables that benefit all of your learners? After all, learners with short attention spans are one of the most challenging groups to address, as they often lack the capacity to focus on tasks for a long period of time. Therefore, if you design your e-learning courses with the specific needs of these learners in mind, you might just end up designing an e-learning course that is more engaging and more memorable for every member of your audience. One of the most effective ways to achieve this is by dividing longer e-learning courses into short modules that can be easily digested, rather than having an e-learning course that lasts 1 hour, for example. Create 10 smaller e-learning modules that, they only last about 6 minutes each, which gives your learners the chance to fully comprehend each lesson before moving on to the next one. You can also keep each slide to 15 seconds or so that way your learners can stay fully focused on the slide and the screen instead of losing interest by staring at the same images for a long period of time. Like 60 seconds seems to be a bit long for that type of staring. Number 2 idea, second tip I have, is gamify your e-learning experience. So learners, even those who have impressive attention spans, can sometimes disengage from the learning process if it isn't motivationally enough. This is why it's a good idea to gamify. Gamify is the new thing. It's their learning experiences, gamifying learning experiences by integrating badges, points, and leaderboards into your e-learning course design. This is great for e-learning courses, by the way. This boosts engagement and brings out the competitive nature in your learners, which encourages them to do their best and stay focused on the task at hand rather than having their attention wander. Also, another tip that we have in e-learning, focus on immediate learning objectives. The main reason why your learners participate in an e-learning course is to learn new skills or gain knowledge that they did not have in the here and now. While some may be aware of the long benefits of acquiring the information, a vast majority of learners want to be able to apply the knowledge as soon as they complete the e-learning course. So, for example, if they need to build skills that they will be using on the job, they need to be aware of how many they can apply these skills from day to day one, and what benefits they might have to expect to receive by mastering these types of e-learning content. Another tip is offering them real-world value. So this is important, right? Learners with short attention spans need to know that e-learning course is going to offer them real-world value even before they enroll. And e-learning stresses that have stress that could be caused by e-learning courses can be negated through well-described e-learning course descriptions. So it's important to have e-learning descriptions that are effective and really get people to understand what it is the e-learning course is going to do for them. Your scenario should tie into real-world benefits, and your story should always give your learners a clear idea of how they can put their knowledge to use of the steps outside of the virtual learning environment. Because it's important on e-learning that you're always connecting the offline world as well as the online world. Another tip that we have is navigating through should be simple and straightforward. We have all come across at least one e-learning course, if not several, that have been so challenging to navigate that we simply gave up after the first few screens. Maybe the navigation icons were hidden by graphics, or the links directed us to outdated sites. Whatever the case may be, though, our attention was lost and not even given high-quality e-learning content or stunning e-learning visual design, which could win it back. This is why it's crucial to build an e-learning course easy to navigate from start to finish, as learners with short attention spans simply won't stick around if your encounter is course flow is confusing or it's frustrating. So you want to make sure and design a very straightforward e-learning visual design and content. It's got to be easy to navigate. Also, you want to cut out the clutter. There are a myriad of reasons why you should avoid cluttering your e-learning course pages. Not only does it decrease the value of your e-learning course, as learners aren't able to take away from the key pieces of information they need, but also it distracts from the core concepts and ideas. Having a short attention span already predisposes learners to a wandering eye, and integrating an abundance of extraneous information, is the word I'm looking for, images and graphics, won't help in this regard. So, you've really got to cut out the clutter. Also, as a final tip, is to integrate pause points throughout the e-learning course. So pausing every so often is very important when it comes to e-learning courses. Learners with short attention spans often prefer e-learning courses that give them an out from time to time. They need to be able to take a break every now and then to refresh their minds and absorb what they have already learned. They also need to be able to step away from the e-learning course if they have a busy schedule or need to take care of personal obligations. You can keep your short attention span learners focused on the e-learning experience by integrating pause points throughout the e-learning course that allow them to pause and then return back where they left off. Create an index that features all the lessons so that they can easily begin again when they have time. Or simply, if you don't have those types of abilities with your e-learning platform, do like we do, and that is we just simply break up our modules into 1-hour pieces, which are very short and designed to be able to be watched in 1-hour increments, and then walk away, walk back. You can choose to watch them all at once, or you can choose to break it up, and it makes it a lot easier for the e-learner to focus on. You know, you use these 7 steps to create e-learning courses that have a lasting impression on your audience and draw them into the e-learning experience. By doing so, you even have the power to turn most distracted and impatient ones into lifelong learners. So, you know, there's some tips there for how you bring e-learners in and help to squash that attention span issue that you seem to have. So, you know, when we talk about e-learning, we talk about webinars, web conferences, webcasts. What are the differences? What are the differences between like web conferences and webinars and webcasts? Well, there are significant differences between the three. There seem to be many terms floating around that they all seem to mean the same, but they really don't. Well, the short answer is no. There really is differences between all three of those. For some providers, one big difference is how many price their plans with regards to webinars versus web conferencing, but there are other differences as well. But first, how are all these terms the same? Well, in general, they all refer to meetings that are conducted virtually over the internet, right? All three can be considered virtual meetings, presentations, or training sessions that utilize the internet and a web browser to connect at least 2 people who are on different computers, and many times in different locations, so that they can view and in many cases hear the same content in real time. Now, how are they different? Well, generally, web conferencing tends to be smaller groups of people and tend to be much more interactive in nature. There tends to be application, desktop, screen sharing with much higher likelihood for transfer of control to participants on web conferencing. Other features may involve user polling, meeting recordings, online collaboration via the use of a whiteboard or a drawing tool. Those are all different ways that web conferencing, typically different than a webinar. Now, what about webinars? Webinars, on the other hand, well, they involve larger groups of participants, usually involve PowerPoints or slides, and are not as interactive. They may involve multiple presenters presenting to the group. They often require user registration in advance via email or some sort of sign-up. They normally utilize self-branding, where the general idea is to use your own company's logo, etc., to brand the conference room as well. Although like a web conference, webinars are much less likely to have control passing remote control or video conferencing. Webinars are more stagnant than other types of e-learning platforms. Vendors will many times price their product differently for webinars, figuring they will involve larger groups of people, and you will want to have more sophisticated usage, sign-up, statistical reporting for webinars. Finally, you also have webcasts, and webcasts are very similar to other forms of broadcasting information because they use the internet to broadcast information that is either live or has been recorded. This can be either audio or video transmissions. As an example, a company that may broadcast a press conference at a later date in addition to doing the live call as well. So there are differences between all three of the the types of web conferencing, whether it be webinar or webcasting or web conferencing. Some final thoughts. When considering the difference between the terms, it really boils down to the level of collaboration that is involved. Web conferences meetings are normally highly collaborative in nature and usually involve smaller groups of individuals. Webinars, on the other hand, they are less collaborative, more informative, presenter style, possibly with more than one presenter, and larger in nature. They will normally involve question and answer sessions, but usually don't involve a whole lot of two-way communication beyond that. And webcasts, well, they're primarily one-way communications via either audio or video to an audience that does not communicate back to them. So, there are some differences between the three, and it's good to know the differences because it's going to make a big difference when you're deciding on the platform that you want to use if you decide to do an e-learning program or a distance learning program. Drafting a lesson plan that works online, what is it exactly that you need for that? Well, what does the student need to learn? That's the first question. The second question is what teaching and learning activities will the presenter use? What teaching and learning activities would I use if I were going to create a lesson plan that works online? And finally, the other question is, what is the desired learning outcome for the student? So all three of these need to be taken into consideration when you're developing a lesson plan that works online. So drafting a lesson plan that works online. Let's start from the beginning, though, on how to prepare any lesson plan, because that is really where we have to start. Lesson plans are prepared quite differently between the two, but there are some basics that you need to know about lesson planning as well. So strategies for an effective lesson plan. Well, a lesson plan is the instructor's roadmap of what students need to learn and how it will be done effectively during the class time. Before you plan your lesson, you will first need to identify the learning objectives for the class meeting. Then you can design appropriate learning activities and develop strategies to obtain feedback on student learning. A successful lesson plan addresses, for instance, and integrates these three types of key components. Objectives for student learning is one, teaching learning activities is two, and strategies to check student understanding. So those are all key components when you're trying to develop a successful lesson plan. Specifying concrete objectives for student learning will help you determine the kinds of teaching and learning activities you will use in class. While those activities will define how you will check whether your learning objectives have been accomplished or not. So really, you want to keep these types of components in mind when you're developing your lesson plan. So let's talk a little bit about lesson plans. Let's talk about outline learning objectives. Okay, there are 6 different steps to creating a lesson plan, and the first one is outline learning objectives. The first step is to determine what your students want to learn and to be able to assist them at the end of the class. To help you specify your objectives for student learning, answer these following questions. What is the topic of the lesson? What do I have to do to get students to learn? What do I want them to understand and be able to do at the end of the class? And what do I want them to take away from the particular lesson? Those are 4 key questions you need to ask when you're outlining your learning objective. Once you outline the learning objectives for the class meeting, rank them in terms of their importance. This step will prepare you for managing class time and accomplishing the more important learning objectives in case you are pressed for time. And when you do that, you want to consider the following questions. What are the most important concepts, ideas, or skills that you want your students to be able to grasp and apply? Why are they important? If I ran out of time, which ones could not be omitted? And conversely, which ones could I skip if I'm pressed for time? Those are all questions that you need to ask in lesson planning as well. So number 2 is developing the introduction. And this is an important phase of the lesson planning process as well. Now that you have learning objectives in order of their importance, design the specific activities you will use to get students to understand and apply what they have learned. Because you will have a diverse body of students with different academic and personal experiences, they may already be familiar with the topic. That is why you might start with a question or activity to gauge students' knowledge of the subject or possibly their preconceived notions about it. For example, you can take a simple poll. How many of you have heard of X? Raise your hand if you have. Right? That allows you to understand a little bit better. And I find that this works well, particularly with technology classes. If you decide to teach a technology class, you're going to learn real fast that everybody comes with a different set of experiences and learning base. So sometimes it is good to take that simple poll to figure out where exactly you need to start. You can also gather background information from your students prior to class by sending students an electronic survey or asking them to write comments on an index card. This additional information can help shape your introduction, learning activities, etc. And when you have an idea of the student's familiarity with the topic, you will also have a sense of what to focus on. Develop a creative introduction to stimulate the interest and to encourage students, for example, like personal anecdotes, historical events, thought-provoking dilemmas. Help them to create an introduction to the topic that stimulates their interest. Consider the following questions when planning your introduction, though. How will I check whether students know anything about the topic, or do I have any preconceived notions about it? What are some commonly held ideas or possibly misconceptions about this topic that students might be familiar with or might be exposed to? What will I do to introduce the topic? These are some important questions you want to ask when developing the introduction. It is important, again, to have a strong introduction to understand what it is that your students need to learn, whether it be through polling or through predetermined surveys, or just having a conversation with them. It's important because it helps to develop and to set that classwork, that classroom time as you move forward. So number 3 on drafting a lesson plan that works, plan the specific learning activities, the main body of the lesson. So this is the crux of the learning activities. Prepare several different ways of explaining the material, like real-life examples, analogies, visuals, different types of things like that, to catch the attention span of more students and appeal to different learning styles. We'll learn more about learning styles when we have our live classes. As you plan your examples and activities, estimate how much time you will spend on each. Build in time for extended explanation or discussions, but also be prepared to move on quickly to different applications or problems and to identify strategies that check for understanding. Some of the questions that could help in designing the learning activities could be, what will I do to explain the topic? Maybe what will I do to illustrate the topic in a different way? How about how can I engage students in the topic? What are some of the relevant real-life examples, analogies, or situations that can help students understand the topic? Or what about what will students need to do to help them understand the topic better? These are all questions that are important when trying to develop the learning activities for the main body of the lesson. Number 4, we have plan to check for understanding, right? So you always have to be able to understand what it is they need to understand. Now that you've explained the topic and illustrated it with different examples, you need to check for student understanding. How will you know the students are learning? Think about some specific questions you can ask students in order to check for understanding. You can write them down and then paraphrase in order to check for understanding, or you can also try to predict the answers your questions will generate. That's always a fun way to try to do it a little bit differently. Decide on whether you want students to respond orally or in writing. And again, you can ask yourself these questions when you're trying to check for understanding. What questions will I ask students to check for understanding? What will I have students do to demonstrate that they are following me? Going back to my list of learning objectives, what activity can I have students do to check whether each of those have been accomplished? These are all important when you're trying to check on the understanding of the learning objective. An important strategy that will also help with you in time management is to anticipate students' questions. When planning your lesson, decide what kinds of questions will be productive for discussion and what questions might sidetrack the class. Think about and decide on the balance between covering content, accomplishing your learning objectives, and ensuring that students always understand. Next, we also have develop a conclusion and a preview. So go over the material covered in class by summarizing the main points of the lesson. You can do this in a number of ways. You can state the main points yourself. For instance, like today we talked about X. You can also ask the students to help you summarize them, or you can even ask all students to write down on a piece of paper what they think were the main points of the lesson. You can review the students' answers to gauge their understanding of the topic, and then explain anything unclear that the class didn't find or when they were not following very well. Conclude the lesson not only by summarizing the main points, but also by previewing the next lesson. How does the topic relate to the ones coming up? This preview will spur students' interest and help them connect the different ideas within the larger context of the class. So those are all important strategies when it comes to developing the lesson plan. We also have creating a realistic timeline. So, GSIs know how easy it is to run out of time and not cover all of the many points they have planned to cover. This is always a very common problem when it comes to lesson planning. A list of 10 learning objectives is not realistic, so narrow down your list to 2 or 3 key concepts or ideas or skills that you want your students to learn. Again, 10 is too many. You want to narrow it down. Instructors also agree that they often need to adjust their lesson plans during the class depending on what the student needs. So your list of prioritized learning objectives will help you make decisions on the spot and adjust your lesson plan as needed. Having additional examples or alternative activities will also allow you to be flexible. And you'll notice that within our live courses we will have that. A realistic timeline will reflect your flexibility and readiness to adapt to the specific classroom environment. And now here are some strategies for creating a realistic timeline. A few things to consider. Eliminate how much time each of the activities will take, then plan extra time for them. So estimate the amount of time and plan extra time for them. When you prepare your lesson plan, next to each activity, indicate how much time you will expect to take on each one. This will help to keep you on track with your different activities. Next, we also have plan a few minutes at the end of each class to answer any remaining questions and sum up key points. Plan an extra activity or discussion question in case you have time left. And always be flexible. Be ready to adjust your lesson plan to students' needs and focus on what seems to be more productive rather than sticking to your original plan. Presenting lesson plans is important. Letting your students know what they will be learning and doing in class will help keep them more engaged and on track. You can share your lesson plan by writing a brief agenda on the board or telling students explicitly what they will be learning and doing in class. Always keep your class involved. Always keep them understanding what it is you're trying to teach. That's so important. You can outline on the board or on a handout the learning objectives for the class. Providing a meaningful organization for the class time can help students not only remember better, but also follow your presentation and understand the rationale behind it in the class activities. Having a clearly visible agenda on the board, for example, will also help you and students stay on track. Reflecting on your lesson plan is also important. When you're developing a lesson plan, it may not work as well as you had expected due to a number of extraneous circumstances, right? That does happen at times, especially as you move on in life. You will definitely have a lot of different stories when it comes to unexpected pieces of a lesson. So, it's important that you shouldn't get discouraged. It happens to even the most experienced teachers. But what you should do is take a few minutes after each class to reflect on what worked well and why, and what could you have done differently. Identifying successful and less successful organization of class time and activities would make it easier to adjust the contingencies of the next class project. You know, one other thing I'll say about the lesson plan and drafting lesson plans, to be effective, the lesson plan does not have to be an exhaustive document that describes each and every possible classroom scenario. Nor does it have to anticipate each and every student's response or question. Instead, it should provide you with a general outline of your teaching goals, learning objectives, and means to accomplish them. It is a reminder of what you want to do and how you want to do it. A productive lesson plan is not one in which everything goes exactly as planned, but one that is in which both students and instructor learn from each other every single time you have the lesson. So that really is what you have to think about when it comes to lesson planning. It's important that in the end, what it really comes down to is a productive lesson. It's not, it is not one that everything goes exactly as planned. And that's important to know because you'll learn over time as you develop lesson plans, as you teach courses, that not everything goes as planned, and that's okay. You just have to learn from it each time and figure out how you make those tweaks and changes for the next class. So moving on, drafting a lesson plan that works. Now let's discuss some tips for successful e-learning courses, right? So number one is planning. Smart planning is a key to success. Before you start writing your course, it's better to plan a framework of your course's description, its learning outcomes, training goals, organization, and selection of course content, assessments, interactions, student expectations, and so forth. Having this information in hand will help things well organized. It'll keep things well organized and help you keep moving forward smoothly. You also have synergy. Synergy, no matter how expert you are in the field and how well crafted your course is, it is always a good idea to share your course's draft with other folks, colleagues, experts, bounce them off family members, someone. The benefit of this practice is that you will get an expert's feedback or just a simple person's opinion and run a quick quality check on your e-learning courses, both at the same time. Do not forget to accept criticism open-heartedly during this process. Remember, it's not about how you're doing, it's about how effectively you're creating the class for others, and that's really what you have to remember. Arousal of interest in learners. Interest is a key factor in learning. Always remember to add items of learners' interest in your courses. Do note that interest doesn't mean flashy pictures or humorous quotes all the time. An interesting element can be added to an online course in the form of interactive games, maybe animations, maybe videos, activities, real-life scenarios. You can even do case studies and, other things. Interesting and relevant images in a course can also be motivated for learners to focus on the subject matter. Sprinkle interactivity and curiosity elements throughout the course to maximize learning. Remember, interesting elements in an online training course can transform a conventional course into an interesting story that every learner would want to hear. Next, we have precision and simplicity. The beauty in effective authoring lies in presenting complex ideas in a simple and straightforward manner. While authoring courses, ensure to make the best use of your course authoring tool that you are using and create simple, precise, and compelling training. Shun lengthy and complicated sentence structures and transfer complex points of your training by using built-in templates such as flowcharts, diagrams, and animations of your course authoring tool. These are all important when you're designing and you're trying to be very simple. You're trying to simplify basically your e-learning course as much as possible. Effective communication is always important. Distance and its impact on communication can be one of the greatest challenges in online training. Most instructors are under a wrong impression that online learning does not require any communication or support. That mindset is very limiting and can result in a non-optimal course. Communication in an online course is important as it is in classrooms, and overcoming the communication barrier between yourself in your potential student is important by increasing communication in the form of feedback during the assessment, clear instructions, student interactivity, and so forth. Finally, we have effective assessments. Assessing students' performance is crucial to the learning process. While well-designed assessments improve instructional process and enhance learning, add challenging assessments, practice exams, and/or knowledge checks during and at the end of each lesson of the course to help learners revise and absorb all the key areas that are important that they have learned during the training. Because feedback and assessment is important, and we're going to talk a little bit more about assessments, feedback, and questionnaires during the live session. So that's something we will get into more detail about once we have our live course. Here's an area that we've just begun to explore as far as e-learning, and that's called gamification. Gamification versus game-based e-learning, how to integrate them into your e-learning course designer. This is all important. Both gamification and game-based e-learning can offer your e-learning course a variety of benefits. However, it's important to know the distinction between gamification versus game-based e-learning so that you can choose what approach better serves your e-learning objective and goals, but also meets the needs of your learners. Let's take a closer look at the basics of both gamification and game-based e-learning in order to determine which methodology is more appropriate for your next e-learning course. By defining gamification, gamification involves the use of game design elements and mechanics and activities that are not inherently game-based. This is done to motivate and engage the learners so they can become active participants in their own learning process. In essence, the e-learning experience itself is transformed into an educational game by using achievement badges, leaderboards, point systems, level progressions, and quests. These game elements are integrated to help the learner achieve their learning goals and objectives. On the other hand, while gamification utilizes game mechanics to transform the e-learning experience into games, game-based e-learning integrates online games into the learning process to teach specific skills or achieve a learning objective. Games are essentially used as e-learning activities to give learners the opportunity to acquire new knowledge or skill sets in a fun and engaging way. All e-learning games typically have rules and specific objectives, and learners run the risk of losing when they participate. It's important. Another important distinction between gamification and game-based e-learning is that in game-based e-learning strategy, the content is designed to fit into the confines of the game. So, we're going to take a quick second here, and we're going to talk, before we talk a little bit more about gamification, I'm going to give you a small example of a gamification that I found online. And again, this is just something that people are using for e-learning now. You find it more and more prevalent in especially younger, I say younger students, but mid-age and lower students, in getting them more involved in the actual learning process through gamification. So we have this one video that we're going to play. It's a brief 8-minute video that I want you to watch on gamification.
Hello, my friend. I'm Dr. Lewill. I understand you are a very busy person, as you seem to be in a real hurry. But to rise high in your career, I think you need to learn a quick lesson on business etiquette. So, would you like to play a quick game with me? If you win, you will join a league of excellent professionals who have good etiquette and are poised to excel in life. If you lose, this elevator will directly take you to my dungeon, and you will be my corporate slave forever. Excellent choice. Let me now tell you the rules of the game. I shall take you through the various departments in my office. In each department, I shall introduce you to a colleague of mine who will provide you with interesting details of business etiquette relevant to that department. I shall keep appearing once in a while and test your knowledge. If you score well, I shall give you access to enter the next department, and if you fail to score well, you will lose a chance. I am a very fair person, so I shall give you 3 chances to escape my dungeon. Remember, if you fail, you will be my slave. Once you complete successfully, I shall also show you a leaderboard with how much you have scored and how good are you compared to others. The progress bar will show how much more you need to go, and the scoreboard will show you your current score. Shall we begin?
Before we start learning about greeting etiquette, let me ask you a quick question. Do you know why we greet people? Let's take a quick check. Click on the correct reason why you think we greet people. Some very commonly used greetings for starting a conversation are, hi, hello, good morning, nice to meet you, glad to meet you, how are you, how do you do? You may not always get a second chance to start a conversation. So, with proper greeting etiquette, you can establish a perfect initial rapport and strike a conversation as per the situation. Jack is new to the company, and he sees his new desk neighbor Sarah sitting at her desk. Help Jack start a conversation with Sarah by placing the right text in his call-out. The 2 main forms of greeting etiquettes are formal and informal greetings. When we greet someone with a formal customary code, it is a formal greeting. And when we greet someone casually, or without any formal customary code, it is an informal greeting. Greetings are usually expressed verbally, or using gestures, and sometimes both together. Some common formal verbal greetings are, glad to meet you. How are you doing? Nice to meet you. Good morning. Good afternoon. Or good evening. And, thank you. And popular formal gestures include a firm handshake, bow, hand kissing, namaste, a polite smile, touching the feet, and saluting. Now let's look at some of the types of handshakes. When a person is nervous, his sympathetic nervous system often becomes overactive, sometimes resulting in sweaty palms. A brush-off handshake is a quick grasp, and then a release that feels like your hand is being shoved aside, as the person does not intend to interact with you. A politician handshake is your hand firmly grasped, as in a normal handshake, and their other hand may cover yours, or be placed on your forearm or shoulder. In a bone crusher handshake, the person continuously squeezes your hand until you cringe, clearly designed to intimidate you. Your handshake will be positive and effective if you plant your feet in front of the other person and lean slightly forward. Look onto the other person's eyes and share a smile while extending your hand. Always avoid looking at the hand, as hands know how to find each other without the help of your eyes. The palm of each hand should make complete contact, while the fingers create a firm grip. Shake 3 to 4 times while eyes are engaged. Exchange pleasant small talk until the hands naturally move apart. Before shaking hands, always make sure that your hands are clean and dry. Hands are soft. You can use lotion or moisturizer if required. Your fingernails are well manicured. Fingers are free of large, obtrusive rings, and your breath is fresh and clean. Which of the following is a characteristic of a positive handshake? Match the handshake with the corresponding attribute by dragging and placing it next to the type of handshake. Hi and
Hello.
are the most commonly used informal greetings in business. Sometimes the word good is dropped, and only
Morning. Afternoon.
or
Evening.
is said instead of
Good morning. Good afternoon.
or
Good evening.
to make it informal. What's up is another popular informal verbal greeting among youngsters. Informal greeting gestures include doing a high five, hugging, hand waving, and casual two-finger saluting.
I hope you like this sample.
So as you can see, there's a lot of different types of gamification options, and there are a lot of companies out there, if you simply Google gamification, that offer these types of games that you can integrate within your either e-learning experiences for your folks, or even on blended courses like we have here that you could do, because gamification is something that is really come into light over the last year or so, and it looks to be trending more so into the future as well. So let's talk a little bit more about gamification. Tips for designing a successful gamification e-learning strategy. Keeping it simple is one. So when you're designing a successful gamification e-learning strategy, you want to keep it simple. You create your gamification strategy. Keeping it simple is better than something that is very lengthy and hard to do. Plus, could be very costly as well. Your learners won't have the time to try and sort through an abundance of rules or guides. They want to know how to earn points or increase their rank on the leaderboard. Therefore, your explanation and overall strategy should not be complicated at all, and it should be fairly simple and easy. It's not a game. Remember, it's an educational game. It's not a video game, and it shouldn't be designed that way as such. So you want to try to keep it as simple as possible. Also, goal achievement should be the primary focus of gamification. Learners who are participating in your e-learning course want to acquire new knowledge or develop their skills. Earning points or badges is usually just a bonus. This is the reason why goal achievement should always be the primary focus of your e-learning course. All gamification mechanics you use must tie into the objectives or goals that your learners are trying to achieve. For example, if you are utilizing a badge system, then create a badge for each skill set or task that must be mastered. That's a good way to set up your achievement skills. Also, opt for an intrinsic reward. That's a tongue twister right there. These types of rewards, such as those intangibles, are going to be a great motivator for your learners, while other rewards, such as gift cards, might draw in certain crowds. Those who really want to learn are usually inspired by something as simple as rewards that involve praise and acknowledgement. Never forget that whether you're doing online e-learning, distance learning, or classroom learning, that it is important to reward folks at least through praise and acknowledgement. And you can be creative in other ways as well. Human beings always want to be noticed for a job well done, and tapping into this source of motivation can give your learners the encouragement and drive they need to succeed in that particular realm. So designing a successful game-based learning, e-learning strategy, number one, immersion and interactivity are all important. Learners must be immersed within the e-learning game in order to truly benefit from it. For example, if they are engaging in an interactive scenario game, they have to feel as though they can relate to the characters in the situation, or else they won't have the motivation they need to progress through the levels. A high level of interactivity must also be present. Learners should be encouraged to actively participate in the game through a variety of point-and-click actions or by branching scenarios, so that they remain focused on the goals and the objectives of the game itself. Also, you want to walk the fine line between challenging and frustrating. The issue that arises with many e-learning games is that they are either too easy or too complicated, which bores the learners and makes them discouraged from e-learning experience, or they are overly challenging. Those that are too difficult will also make the learners disengage, as they will be too frustrated to progress through each of the levels. As a result, you have to ensure that you gradually increase the difficulty level from your e-learning games. Do some research about your audience beforehand. That's important to do. By researching your audience, you can gain the ability to learn as much as possible about the past experiences, educational background, and professional knowledge, so that you can design an e-learning game that is ideally suited for the skill and experience type levels. Also, the learning objectives are the star of the show. So while your e-learning game should be entertaining and exciting, ultimately, the learning objective is what truly matters. Everything in your e-learning game should be geared toward achieving objectives and goals and providing your learners with the key takeaways they need to modify learning behaviors or improve some aspect of their personal or professional lives. If the learning objectives aren't the focus of your game-based e-learning course, then it's not going to offer your learners any real value, and it's not going to help outside of the virtual classroom. Both gamification and game-based e-learning can provide your audience with the motivation and inspiration that they need to go viral, to get real value from your e-learning course. The trick is choosing the right approach so that you can achieve desired results and learning outcomes by catering to the specific needs of your learners. So, gamification is obviously, I keep saying over and over again, is something that is coming down the pike. It's something that if you decide to get into the e-learning platform, it really should be encouraged, and it's something that you can do some research on. And as these gamification products become more and more readily available, the costs are becoming less and less. We're seeing them used a lot in corporate environments. So large offices or franchises are using gamification within their built-in systems of their e-learning objectives. So keep gamification in mind if you decide to create an e-learning or distance learning course. Now we're going to move on to our last section and basically just talk a little bit about platforms for distance learning. So there are a lot of different platforms that are out there for distance learning. I have a few here that I've just showed as an example that you may want to research, because there is a lot of information out there in distance learning. So these types of platforms are pretty strong in the market right now, and they are fairly easy to use. Some of them may require a little bit more a level of expertise than others, but what I would strongly suggest is going through reviews and finding out which e-platform will work best for you if you decide to create a distance learning educational program. So let's take just quick 2 minutes to look at some of these that I have right here, the on-stream webinars, the WebEx. So, in breaking down some of the different ones that they have, the costs vary anywhere between $70 and $150. And a lot of these platforms are based on the amount of people that you're going to have, the max amount of attendees. So obviously, the more attendees you have, the more expensive the platform may very well be. And when I say large amounts of attendees, I'm anywhere between 50 and 150 people. If you're only talking about 20 or 30 people, then that's not as expensive. But when you get into the 150 to 200 or plus attendees, then the platforms tend to be a little expensive. The on-stream webinar runs roughly $80. The WebEx is like $50. Webinato is $100. Adobe Connect, which is one that I've used in the past and it's pretty popular, that's around $100 for I think it's max attendance of 100 people. The Click Webinar is about $80. The GoToWebinar is around $100. Ready to Talk is over $100. Big Market is probably the less expensive of most of them. The Big Market is about $50. And Mega Meeting is $130, and any meeting is $78 to $85. So again, it all depends on the amount of people that you're going to have attending your courses. And the other thing, you want to kind of keep in mind when it comes to exploring platforms is a couple things you have to ask yourself. Is it mobile friendly? Can you share your desktop? Can you preview slides during your presentation, right? Because we talk about presenter mode and things like that and how important that can be. And most importantly, can you edit your recording? Because those are all important pieces when it comes to your distance education program, especially editing your recording. You're going to find that after the first recording or the second recording, you may need to tweak it a little bit, as we talked about. As you go forward with your program, you may find that some changes need to be made. So it's important that you're able to edit the recording when you need to. It's also important to have a very mobile-friendly platform for learners, because I can tell you that learners do not want to spend most of their time trying to figure out how to get on the platform or listening to it or watching it. They want to spend most of their time learning the subject content that you have on the platform. So it's very important that it be mobile friendly. And of course, sharing the desktop, that's going to be important, because if you're doing more than just PowerPoint, so this particular module just had PowerPointing, but we had the module 4, I believe it was, that had the where we explored some of the different online type of presentation programs. We could only do that by sharing our desktop. So depending on what your distance learning or e-learning topic is going to be, sharing your desktop could very well be important, an important piece when it comes to your platform. So it's something you definitely want to keep in mind. And then there's a website that you can go to, top10reviews.com. That's top10reviews.com, and simply search for the best webinar services. A lot of these places will come up with reviews and give you a matrix of what it is that you may need, you may not need, and how well it performs in these different areas. So I encourage you to explore it if it's something that you're looking to do in e-learning, in the e-learning and distance education realm. You're certainly going to want to look for a strong yet reasonably priced platform. We're going to move forward. We're wrapping things up now on Module 5, and as we do so, we have an online assignment that will need to be completed as part of the amount of hours that you do. So there are 2 assignments that I'm showing right here. The assignment number 1 is watch any 2 past MAR webinars. Now, from my understanding, they have changed the library in the at MAR, so there aren't very many webinars to choose from at this point. But if you could take a look at the MAR webinars, and if there's 2 of them that you can find, look at 2 of them, because what I'd like to do is I'd like you to answer the following questions. What did you like most about each instructor? What did you like least about each instructor? And as a student, what was missing that may have kept you more engaged? So that's assignment number 1. So assignment number 1 is looking at 2 past MAR webinars, answering those questions. And of course, you can email me both these assignments when you have completed them. Assignment 2 is watch one amateur presentation on YouTube. There's a lot of great amateur presentations on YouTube, and it really doesn't matter what the topic is, but I would encourage you to find a good solid topic, something that you might take interest in, so you're more engaged in the actual presentation. And then I'd like you to answer the following questions. How was it different than the professionally produced MAR webinar? And was there anything done differently that could be incorporated into a professional webinar? So these are the 2 assignments that I would like you to do. This is in addition to your drafts for your 2 presentations, your 5-minute presentation and your 10-minute presentation. But these 2 assignments, I would like you to email me once you have watched them with these particular questions answered. Again, assignment 1 and assignment 2. And you can just simply, when you send me the email, you can simply put it under the header assignment 1 with the answers and assignment 2 with the answers. And the subject line should be ITI, so that way it kind of flags me. I get a lot of email, like I'm sure everybody does. And if you put ITI in the subject line, I'll know that it is got to do with the ITI class and the assignments that we have that need to be completed. So that is going to wrap up module number 5, the final of the modules for our blended ITI course. We certainly look forward to seeing you soon in the live classes. And again, the live classes will be 2 10-hour days, and you will learn more about that from the MAR folks soon. But in the meantime, feel free to go back and look at any one of the 5 modules over again if you feel you need to do so. And as always, if you have a question or need some guidance, feel free to shoot me an email at paulchasse@hotmail.com. That's Paul Chasse, CHASSE, @hotmail.com. And we thank you for joining us today.